All right, what's up, folks? We dancing.
Welcome back to the Winner's Circle, everybody. I'm super excited to be back with another episode for you guys. I'm super stoked to talk to our guest this week. I just listened to a podcast that he was on, and I just have so much that I'm excited to talk to him about, but we'll see how it all goes. The goal of this podcast is to help bring you guys people who are winning in the real world. And what winning is living your best life, following your passions, answering your calling, providing what you can for the others around you, even if it might be a little bit more difficult or challenging to do so compared to following a traditional career model. So I'm super stoked to get into this, Derek.
Absolutely. All right, so today's guest is creator of Prehab-Rehab, Tai Cheng, and K3 combat movement systems. He is a speaker, lecturer on optimum human performance and orthopedic medicine through the lenses of Pavel Tsatsouline's kettlebell training methods, FMS, SFMA Functional Movement and Analysis, TRX Sports Medicine, rehabilitation and strength training, traditional martial arts and combative systems, and traditional Chinese manual medicine. He's one of the smartest and most respected people in the strength and conditioning world. I'm stoked to introduce you, Taiha, and our audience to Dr. Mark Chen. Welcome to the Winner's Circle.
Hi, guys. Gosh, after an introduction like that, I feel like I should just hit send at that point. That was awesome. Wow.
Right on. So let's get started right away. And I feel like our first question is a question we ask all guests, and it's so important for us to know. And if the people listening don't know their answer to this question, well, there's no better time to start anything than right here, right now.
Yep.
Dr. Mark Chen, what is your mission here on this earth? What is your purpose on this reality plane?
Grow. Really simple. Just grow. That is probably one of the most difficult and easiest at the same time to do. A lot of times we grow, we progress in terms of time, we make little bits of progress, but how we optimize that growth, how we maximize that growth, and how we explore that growth, I think is something that we could all do a better job of. So that's my job.
I love that. I think that's what we're all here to do, right? If we didn't grow throughout our lives, we would literally still be children. We wouldn't know how to take care of ourselves. There's so much that goes into evolving your consciousness and expanding it and just learning how to take in more and more and then choose what is true to you and everything like that. So I think that's just something that a lot of people don't necessarily set out that's their goal in life, that it kind of just happens for them. And I think being intentional with your growth is so powerful because you are going to be able to catapult yourself way quicker and just learn so much more because we only have a certain amount of time on this planet. And it seems to our minds sometimes a lot of time. And then of course, as you get older, you're like, I don't know what happened to all of that time. So that's beautiful.
Yeah, totally. I think it's especially once you have kids and you start bringing them into the world, you start realizing how damn short time is. Mm-hmm. You turn around and all of a sudden your toddler is now walking, talking, going to school, having deep conversations with you. And it's sort of wow, man, time is flying. Yeah. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's crazy actually thinking about how quickly kids pick up on things. Because each year, I have little brothers, they're 7 and 10, I'm 24, so they're very young. And so I've seen them each year, it's crazy amounts of growth, right? And as we get older, I feel that's not, for some people, that's not necessarily seen as much of that amount of growth, yet we all have the power, the ability to grow and learn that much if we are intentional with it.
Totally. And I think as a leader or as a role model or as a clinician or as a parent or as a big brother or sister or a coach, when you're in a position that people's eyes are on you as a model, as an example, you have actually even more of a calling or more of an obligation to be even more intentional and more deliberate about your growth. Because everything that you do, everything that you say, like a friend of mine, Peter Crone, has a great line saying that like kids will seldom succeed at listening to you and they will always succeed at becoming you. So like if you are really on point with how you hold yourself accountable and how you look for your own liabilities in behavior and thought processes and whatever it is, then you're always going to grow. And in doing so, you'll always be the best possible role model for the people that are depending on you.
Totally. It's so much more about leading by example than by telling somebody what to do, right? Like if they don't see you doing what you're telling them to do, they're definitely not gonna retain that and understand how important it is, especially when you're kind of in that wiser position. So
yeah. And now that I'm flirting with 50, I definitely it's been a transition for me because I'm for a lot of my life I've been used to being like the little bro in the room, and so now to be that guy, where it's like people will text me, people will call me, people will come to me for advice, people look to me for guidance. It's like, wow, yeah, like I realize now more than ever, like I've got to be that guy who's got his own stuff together, like trying to be as on point as possible so that like there's no incongruency, there's no inconsistency, and there's no falsehood in terms of like the advice that I give, because I'm living.
Beautiful.
And as a part of that process of growing, I think it's always important to always be the student in many ways. And some of your greatest teachers are your daughter and your son. You have a 7-year-old daughter, I believe, and your son is 13. What are the latest lessons you've learned from being a father to those two beautiful children?
Ooh, God, dude, where do I start with that? Honestly, like I'm not saying that as a blow off. I'm saying that as like every single day I interact with them, every single time I interact with them, it's some little nuance that I didn't catch before. Like when I had my son before my daughter was born, I thought, I was a pretty decent dad. I'm pretty involved. I love the hell out of my son. But then like when my daughter was born, it's like she challenged me because like I didn't have sisters or anything like that growing up, so it's like I had no clue how to raise a daughter, which is part of the reason why I grew out my hair. And then so with her, like trying to be a better dad, trying to understand her perspective, trying to be even more present with her, like, and the little things that she says that I listen to with different ears, it's helping me, I think, in a lot of ways every single time be a better dad to my son. So like the lessons are non-freaking stop. I can't single one out. I really can't.
What I've been really focusing on and learning recently is how much life is so about the subtleties, right? There are just subtle changes and shifts and all of this stuff. And when you learn how to tune into those and really look to learn from those, you are just so much more aware of everything that's going on. I can imagine as best as I can, not having any real interaction in that way with a female, and it's your little girl, you want to be able to understand her as best as you can. And I think that's when paying attention to those little changes and little changes within you and within her tones of voice. Sometimes kids don't know how to ask for what they want, and just looking between the lines of things is so powerful. And listening to your podcast, and how you said that every time you drop her off at school, she's like smiling and you're smiling ear to ear, and that just warmed my heart so much, because I have 5 younger siblings. They're all way younger than me, and I feel that same way with them. Like they're my pride and joys, and knowing that you can be this person for them and choosing to be a certain way for them, because it's like parenting / having younger people around you is like not easy. There's no handbook. Like you do the best you can, but knowing that you can choose how to be with them, because sometimes it would be easy to, you know, get mad or upset or frustrated at, you know, children sometimes, but we always have that choice to show up for them in the way that we best know how to, and we're always just doing our best. So I think that's beautiful, and I can totally relate to how just all interactions with children, they really teach you so much, because kids are just here to enjoy life, you know, like they're not concerned about so much else that we are always thinking about, worrying about the future, blah, blah, blah. I hung out with my little brothers a few months ago, and just learning how to be completely present with them, you know, like they're just trying to have fun. And I think we all could use a lot more of that in our lives.
Totally. I think that, you know, some of the lessons of being there for kids, whether it's younger siblings, whether it's your students, whether it's your kids, whatever, right? Like those same lessons in how to be present for them and how to listen to them and how to like nurture them and, you know, give them space to like explore the world and have fun. If we did more of that for each other as adults and just like allowed people some space, allowed people some chill, allowed ourselves to slow down rather than being like, okay, we got to get this, and like, and being on the clock and being so frantic. Man, what a different society we'd have.
Seriously.
In terms of coaching kids, when I was an ambassador for Adidas and Reebok, I worked really closely with kids. And a really surprising fact that I learned is like the number one most important way to influence your child to be physically active is you as a parent leading by example, not telling them, oh, you do this sport, you do this. No, you be active yourself, or you be active with your children. Those are the top two ways to lead, coach children. And influence them to be active. And I know you do that. There's a lot of videos you have on your social media training with your children, with your two children. What are some other strategies other than being present and leading by example that you recommend for not only parents working with their own children, but also coaches that work with children?
Give space and slow down. It's a tough thing because like a lot of people, I think, measure success in terms of how quickly they can get someone to improve their performance. But oftentimes you'll get someone to be able to improve performance sustainably if you back off and just get off their backside. You know, like if you're always harshing on a kid or always like, come on, and driving them, or just like up their, you know, whatever with your encouragement. I say that in air quotes because like people like, they think they're encouraging, but really it's just you're putting stress on someone else. You're putting pressure on someone else. And there needs to be a little bit more chill rather than so much like chomping at the bit. I think allowing kids to play, allowing people to play, right? Like for you, Derek, since you took K3, right? Like we did a lot of drills in K3, but like within those drills, there's a lot of play, there's exploration, right? So rather than you have to memorize this exact technique, this exact stroke, this exact whatever, right? Like instead of being so like dilettantish, like meaning you have to do everything a certain like perfect whatever, right? Letting you be able to explore movement or letting you be able to explore a concept in broad strokes and then play with it, explore it, have fun with it, make a game out of it. Then you get the reps, and then within that context, you get more comfort. And then in terms of more comfort, then it's more sustainable to build competence and confidence. So I think that's the big thing for kids. As adults, give them space, give them encouragement, let them modulate the speed, but give them encouragement without having to always be so harsh.
Yeah, that kind of ties into something that you talked about in the other podcast with Kyle. About this society mindset of go hard as you can. I wrestled in high school. I did judo. Wrestling, as most people would feel or know, like they really work you really, really hard, and it's like go as hard as you can. And at least my coach, or how I kind of viewed it, that's the intensity that I took on as being successful, or like what I had to do to be successful. And that led to injuries, that led to a lot of things. And that's something that I think we're kind of transitioning out of nowadays, where it used to be, I guess we're kind of in the middle, but like a lot of people are still going really hard as they can, as much as they can, as often as they can. And now we're like, okay, you need rest, like, you know, and learning where that balance is about when to push your body so that you can break through those mental barriers. However, always listening to your body, because your body's trying to talk to you all the time. And if you're in pain or something's feeling weird, like that's your body trying to tell you to like slow down. Yet so many people push through that all the time and then injure themselves. So it's interesting that most people don't feel comfortable taking things slow and moving, you know, they think it's better, for example, doing like 10 squats with weight, like the faster you do it, the better. Yet you're less mindful, you are less time under tension, like all of this stuff, where I think it's a misunderstanding in people's minds of what is like working hard. You know what I mean?
I think the toughest thing about working hard isn't always the intensity at that split second, but rather like the consistency over time.
Right.
Like, you know, even if you're injured, like let's say, for example, all right, like I did a 45-minute jump rope workout the other day and like my calves were torched. So like trying to run or trying to do like a kick heavy workout the next day or the next couple of days wouldn't exactly be the smartest thing for me, but like taking the time to move, to flush those muscles out a different way, whether it's doing forms, whether it's doing like air uchikomi or whatever like that, or something, just something to be able to get movement going on rather than to like push it, you know, in a hard way, allows you to still make those little adjustments, but still keep training without having to like kill yourself on the way.
Right. Totally. It's about adjusting to what your body's telling you. Like, oh, I was planning to do this, however, my back is really tired from surfing or whatever. And just learning to be a little bit less rigid. I think, you know, where masculine energy is like rigid structure, like doing, and not just being able to go with the flow and like just flow with the wind that your body's telling you to flow with. You know, there's so many ways that you can be active, stay moving, that may not be what was part of your plan, but that's how life is. Like you adjust to what goes on and what happens. You're not always going to be able to stick to your plan, right? So I think that's a really big skill to build, and just like releasing that need to control exactly like how it's going to go all the time.
Well, we muted that over the years, right? Like with kids, we tell them, hey, focus on this, focus on this. And it's like blinders, right? And so the more we press kids to do that kind of stuff, like, hey, focus here, focus here, focus here, ignore all that. We've also dampened their awareness, or dampened, I think, societal awareness. So now that when we've got people that are now as adults, for example, dealing with a situation like COVID, where like you don't have the same opportunities, life is changing, you've got to be able to, you know, adapt on the fly. That lack of awareness, which used to be like, okay, I'm all over the place and I'm aware of everything that's all over the place, to now like years of tunnel vision. Those years of tunnel vision have made it harder for us to go back and still be adaptable on the fly again. So yeah, I think there's definitely something towards what you're saying there. Like we've got to be able to function both ways, like dial in when we need to dial in, and then like soften our gaze and still amplify our awareness every other time.
Yes, exactly.
So Taiha and I met through Aubrey Marcus's Go For Your Win course. And my main takeaway from that course is we live in such a destination-oriented society and culture. When I get this job, when I get this degree, when I get this relationship, when I get to this destination, everything will be great. But the reality is the sweetness lays in the process, the journey there. What does going for your win mean to you, Mark? And what does that look like for you in your life today? How are you winning in your life today?
Oh, dude, that's, I think the little wins are every second you get to smile, like every second you get to go like, I like how that turned out. Or every second that you recognize that there's some sort of richness that dropped in your lap. Like, I get wanting to have a big goal. I totally get that, totally appreciate that. And I've certainly got a bunch of big goals myself. But if we don't allow ourselves to dig those moments that we have along the way, we're going to be wallowing in like a self-imposed misery way too often when we don't need to. And there's so many like, man, they're like, I say all the time, I have this hashtag like luckiest Chinaman on earth. And like, I really believe that that's me. I mean, like, and I'm sure there are a bunch of other people that have that same kind of mindset, but man, I mean, like when I look at my day, you know, there's so much I've got to be grateful for. I mean, like on one hand, I could say that, man, 2020 just blows. Like it really, because like at the beginning of this year before COVID and everything else happened, like my calendar was like jammed. I mean, like it looked like it was going to be one of my most lucrative years in a long freaking time. And I was like biting at the bit to make that happen. And then like one thing after another, like shut down this, that, and the other. So like, and then my workshop calendar just like for the rest of the year just went completely blank. Now, on one hand, I could go like, man, this is miserable. I'm like this and that and complain about the whole thing. On the other hand, like I've gotten to spend so much more time with my kids. You know, while my parents were supposed to be here in LA with me from just December to March, they're still here now. So I'm getting all that extra time with them. Like, you know, my kids and my parents get to spend time together. I get to spend more of my own time training not only myself, but also my kids. So like there are so many micro wins along the way that I think people don't allow themselves to just kind of like revel revel is not quite the right word. Like, you know, when you take a sip of something that is like a really fine wine and just kind of like savor, that's the word, savor that taste. You're like, this is just awesome. Like when you savor that win, those little micro wins, and then you're happy, you're in a good space, mentally, physically, emotionally, and then you build on them time after time, like those little micro wins, your life becomes rich in a different way, rather than like, I need this big thing, like I need this car, or I need this house, or I need this certain like figure in the bank account. And I think, you know, Aubrey has said this more than once. Like you will see people that are filthy freaking rich and miserable. And for me, having lived in LA more than half my life now, I can definitely tell you, like, I know people that are living the life of like the lifestyles of the rich and shameless, and just not happy individuals. They may have a lot of means. They may be able to do a lot of things like that we all wish we could do, like that don't have the same number of zeros in their bank account. But on the other hand, like, are they happy at the end of the day? Or are they tense? Are they like, is there something about their heart that's fighting itself or fighting the world? Versus like, are they grateful? Are they like, you know, in a good place? Are they able to smile at the end of the day? Are they able to smile when they get up? You know, and I think those are the wins that we need to recognize, celebrate, and build on.
Beautiful. What you said about people who have on the outside what everybody looks, what would look to everybody like success, right? Success and happiness and everything is all from within you. If you are focused on your material world, your external world for that success, that safety, all of that, but you don't feel that inside, then that's not going to matter. You're not going to be happy. You're not going to feel fulfilled in your life because all of that stuff could just disappear one day, you know? I think that goes along with what you were saying about, you know, it's about your perspective. With this COVID and everything, there's a lot that we missed out on this year, but can you change that? No. Do you want to focus on that and make your day kind of shitty by focusing on that? That's your choice, you know? And what I've been doing a lot is practicing gratitude, like physically writing in the mornings, what am I grateful for? At night before I go to bed, what am I grateful for? And it's those like sure, there's big things or stuff like the grass outside my window, you know, like there's so much that we just take for granted because we're not being present. We're just having those blinders on, you know? And I think it's so beneficial when you seriously sit and just think, what did it take for me to be sitting in this chair right now? Like there's so much that I am blessed with to be able to be here, to be able to live in a house, to be able to have food, like all of this, and focusing on what we have versus what we don't have or what we missed out on. Like that is a choice that you can make. And I can tell you right now, it is way more fun being focused on what you have in life and not what you're lacking. Lack is also something that we have made up. It's not like the universe, nature, it doesn't experience lack. That is something that humans have constructed. And I think also just like what we've been taught that we should have, and when we don't have it, then we're in lack. But there's no should have this or that either. Like, and then also you were talking about having a big goal, and you know, that's great to have, but I think the problem comes when you are focused, like your happiness, your fulfillment is dependent on whether or not you reach that goal, because we don't know that tomorrow's going to be here. And if this opportunity just totally is done, or this relationship ends, or whatever it is, if that was what you were depending your happiness and fulfillment on, then you are never also going to be happy. So I've been practicing learning how to be so grateful for this current moment, and enjoying and being present in what I have right now while working towards what I want to create for the world, knowing that I am doing the best that I can in this moment to get myself there, but while practicing unattachment to the outcome of that, which is a lot easier said than done. But I think it's just a skill that we can practice and build a muscle, just like a muscle. You know, I think pure joy is just like unattachment to everything and gratitude for everything, you know, like there's so much that will just happen for you if you are living in that energy of abundance, of fulfillment, of love, of happiness. And that is all in the right now, not in, oh, I'll feel that tomorrow or next week or next year when this happens, just as Derek was saying. So that was a beautiful share. Thank you so much for all of that.
Yeah,
so
I think, but
no, you go ahead, Mark.
I was going to say that, like, I think a lot of us tend to like attach labels to ourselves, like we are this or we are that, or like we are a Tesla owner, or we are a martial artist, or we are whatever, an Under Armour wearer, or you name it, whatever, right? Like, whatever the label is, like I do this, I'm a coffee drinker. Like, what if, you know, what if that changes? What if all of a sudden, like for the next God forbid, the next 2 years, like the coffee crops have some like nasty disease, and like, you know, or like Tesla goes under, or whatever, right? Whatever the thing is, right? Like if you label yourself as that, then you're boned, like the moment that situations change. But if you are Taiha, or you're Derek, or you're Mark, or you're whoever, and you just like, okay, there's no coffee, great, I'll drink tea, or I'll drink water. There's no Tesla, okay, I'll do a Toyota, whatever. Like if you're adaptable and you can flow into whatever the opportunities are. And there's the other thing too, right? I think a lot of people look at lack and gripe about lack rather than looking at and seeing the situations of opportunity instead.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
I feel that one thing people don't do enough is celebrate their wins, celebrate their successes, celebrate their achievements. So this is your moment to celebrate some of your greatest accomplishments that you're most proud of. Let's hear them.
Ooh, man, you put me on the spot with that one. I generally like to just kind of smile about them. I don't know if celebrates is necessarily the vibe that I I'm all about, like, I celebrate what I have access to. I'll say that. Like, that's something I celebrate. Like, I celebrate the fact that I've got freaking unbelievable teachers. I'll celebrate the fact that, like, some of the people that have been my hero throughout the majority of my lifetime are, like, you know, people that are on my contacts list on my phone and, like, text me or something like that. Like, that kind of stuff I'll celebrate. I'll celebrate that, like, you know, I get to do this podcast with you. I get to reach, you know, all of these people through your audience. I get to meet you guys. Like, I get to hang out pre-COVID. You know, I celebrate that I've got these kinds of opportunities, but, like, I don't know that I celebrate, like, particular accomplishments or achievements, like, you know, or ranks or whatever, you know, like black belts or degrees or whatever. Like, to me, like, okay, that's cool. I appreciate that. But, like, the fact that I have access to this training, like, I get to be part of it, I get to be included, that to me is the celebration. You know, like, I get to be part of my kid's life. I get, like, dude, like, that's something that I think, you know, lately, for whatever reason, through social media, there have been a fair number of people reaching out to me, like divorced dads, and they're like, man, you know, I wish I could be part of my kid's life, or, like, I struggle to be part of my kid's life. How do I do that? How do I, you know, what are some words of advice? And, like, these are the things that I, like, have made me keenly so much more appreciative of the moments, the seconds I get to spend with them. So, like, those to me are the wins. Like, yeah, that more than anything else.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So since we're talking about that, let's talk about relationships. So you are not you're not with the mother of your children.
No.
So just what have you learned from relationships, and how is that to have to share custody of the children, and how do you advise those single parents, but also just relationships? What have you learned about relationships on your path?
Oh, okay. So let me try and chew that elephant a bite at a time.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the mother of my kids, trying to navigate, you know, dual custody is always a challenge, especially when there's residue of an emotional hurt, which usually there is, because it's like, if two people bring kids into the world and they're really happy together, then they're together, right? There's no custody issue to be worked out with. When there is some, like, shadow of a heartbreak, or shadow of hurt feelings, or shadow of, like, an argument that didn't get resolved, then it's really important to try and, like, just be as chill as possible and not bring that old upset or not bring that old discontent into a current situation. And I think that's something that I find, like, myself reminding not only, like, other people, but also myself, of when I have to deal with any issues regarding that. So, like, when it comes to your exes, when it comes to people you have to break up with, or people that you have to, like, reformulate relationship boundaries with, that's an important thing. Like, sometimes just let stuff go. And, you know, as difficult as it is, because you want closure, you want some sort of reconciliation, or you want some sort of, like, outcome that vindicates you, that's ego talking. Like, the best thing that you can do a lot of times, and also the hardest thing for you to do, is to just go, like, I'm not going to get the closure that I wanted, in the sense that, like, it puts me, like, in the position of being right, but you just go on and just work towards your own individual integrity and happiness. So that, I think that as a quote unquote single dad, I think single dad, or whatever label, is kind of whatever, but I think as a human being, as an adult, as someone that, like, has to deal with other people, I think that's important. Like, just to, you know, to not have to come to people with, like, oh, you said this last time, you were, you know, just screw that, let it go. Like, just try and deal with people with as much calm and equanimity as you can each time, and treat them with respect, treat them with softness, and then try and notice how much salt you might bring into the relationship or the conversation. Like, if for whatever reason, like let's say Taha and I had an argument, and like that was 2 weeks ago, and I'm still a little bit salty over that. Like my word choice, my tone of voice, my diction, my facial expressions, my body language might convey that if I'm not aware of that kind of hurt or that kind of upset or that kind of saltiness. And so like one of the things that in terms of relationships that I think has been really enlightening, I don't know what the right word is, but really helpful for me at least, is noticing when I'm feeling a little bit salty or I'm feeling a little bit slighted or a little bit tense, and like and unpacking that first before I go and interact with someone else.
Wow, there was so much gold that you just talked about. I'm currently in a life coaching certification course, and we are learning so much about energy, and what you send out is returned back to you, and how much everything in your world is a reflection of what's going on inside of you, right? And I dealt with, my parents got divorced when I was 3, so I actually didn't have to deal with like the hardship of knowing them together, but they really did not get along, and that lasted until they stopped having to talk because I could talk to them for them. And it was, the more that I'm learning about this stuff, like it is your choice to look inward and see, oh, that stung a little bit. Why is that stinging? When people are going to do things in the external world all the time, if you continue letting that pull you away from your center of where you know your heart really is, then you're just going to, your energy is going to just be drained all the time, and you're not going to have a good time on this earth. But if you start looking and being introspective on, why is that hurting me, and what do I need to heal for me to not feel affected by that? Because that's probably going to keep happening. If it's not your girlfriend, it could be your boss, it could be anybody, right? And I think just learning forgiveness, because you talked about just coming to the situation and just letting go and surrendering and bringing that calm, because obviously you want it to be a chill experience. You don't want it to get out of hand. So you have to do the work to be able to allow that to happen, and being able to forgive people or yourself for whatever happened in the past, because you cannot change it. And all anybody is ever trying to do is their best with the tools that they have. Like, there's a lot in my past that I could get really upset about, and I was upset about for a really long time, but I would know that I was just doing what I thought was best at that moment. And now I know better, and now I can send that person love, send that version of me love, send that ex love for doing that to me. But I know how hurt they must have been hurting, how much they must have been hurting to do that to me, because that was a reflection of what was going on inside of them too. So learning how to work with more forgiveness and just dropping, I think that calmness is like dropping out of your head and into your heart, because our head is what gets all chaotic, and the ego and all of that. Like, we just want to be right. We want to dominate them and not be dominated by them. And all of this, we really react in ways because we get payoffs from it. Like, we get to be right and they get to be wrong, and blah, blah, blah. So learning how to just release that, like, it's just our survival mechanism a lot of the time for what we think is best. But when we come back to our hearts, it's always just, the more love we send out, the more love we're going to get, and the more like we'll be able to breathe and just flow through life, rather than feeling like we're getting hit by walls and just attacked all the time.
For sure. There are some things that you said that kind of like hit heartstrings with me. Like when I split up with my kid's mom, like my daughter was 3 at the time too. So like when I heard you say that, I was like, whoa. But you also mentioned forgiveness a few times. And that's a word that like I've struggled a lot with. Like forgiveness, something about the word forgiveness has not sat easy with me for like years. And like recently I think I've come to a conclusion as far as why. At least it's where my level of understanding is now. I'm not so comfortable with the word forgiveness because in a way it's kind of condescending. Like to say like, I forgive you. It's like, then somehow I have the upper hand. Like, and I'm thinking like now, instead of forgiving, because then that's like implied in forgiveness is a judgment. Meaning like I'm judging you, something that you did as wrong or as inferior or as hurtful or as whatever negative it is, right? So therefore I have to forgive you. Like perhaps now, or at least this is how I'm dealing with perceiving things now, like rather than forgiving, let me just give that space. So like you've got space to do how you need to do, and I've got space to do or live how I need to live. And so there's that kind of integrity. Like you get to have your integrity, or your dignity, and I get to have mine. So rather than like, you were wrong, you effed this up, blah, 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 blah. And like, now I get to forgive you, or I have to forgive you. There's too much weight and too much like, I don't know what the right word is, but there's some kind of like heaviness to that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so,
I totally do. And I never really thought of it that way. But I can definitely see how, especially if you're like being outwardly like speaking to them about it, you know, that would make you feel like there could be an upper hand. I think another thing that I have been working on realizing is how much forgiving has nothing to do with that person, if that kind of makes sense. Like I'm doing it for myself. I'm not doing it for them. So they could even like maybe not know, like if you maybe were not telling them like, I forgive you, but you're more so in your own self, like releasing that energy cord by forgiving them within yourself, if that makes sense.
Kind of, yeah.
It's like, for example, like if somebody, this is a little bit different of example, but if somebody was really horrible to you, say somebody cheated on you or something, like forgiving isn't about telling them what they did was right or okay. But I guess that doesn't really go along with what you were saying, because you were kind of saying it was having to do with them not telling them what they did was wrong. So that was kind of
so let's look at infidelity. Actually, I like that. If I can
okay, yeah,
totally hijack that topic.
Yes, please.
Like, let's say infidelity. Like instead of, okay, someone cheated on, let's say someone cheated on me. Okay, someone cheated on me. So instead of like, you're wrong, you did this, you hurt me, you did this and that and the other. Like, okay, you hooked up with whoever. What's at the root of that? Like,
right.
You know, what do we need to do to get to this? Because like that doesn't honor my boundaries. And if that's something that you want to do, then all you, but like, how can we get to where we're here? And if here isn't where you want to be, then you get to go there. Peace.
Right.
So,
yeah.
like,
And I think, sorry, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
I was just going to say like, that kind of ties into what I was saying about knowing that when people hurt people, it's something within them, right? It's like their inner child was not feeling enough love, or like they had something missing. So it has, realizing that it has nothing to do with your being. It has to do with where they're hurting, and learning how not to look down on them for what they did to you, because that's what you're looking at is it's happening to you. Whereas it's helping both of you grow, because obviously there was a disconnect in that relationship. It was happening for you to realize something wasn't what you thought it was. And this person has to heal all of this, and you have to heal all of this. And it's just happening for you to learn. So I think that's another way to look at it, where forgiveness is just about more so sending love rather than blaming for what happened, I guess.
Yeah, spot on. I agree.
So one thing we've mentioned a few times in this conversation, so I'd like to get into that, is boundaries. and setting boundaries. And I feel with everything, the process starts with you. So you have to learn how to set boundaries with yourself in order to set healthy boundaries with others. But Mark, take it away. Talk to us about setting healthy boundaries in our personal life, but in our relationships as well.
Like, I think the first image that comes to mind is driving. So it's like, if we're driving, right, like boundaries, let's say like there's, you know, like those turtles, those little bumps on the road that like are reflective a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
That's a boundary. It's a soft boundary, right? So it's like if we need to veer into the other lane for whatever reason to avoid a hubcap, to avoid like a dog or whatever, we can veer, right? Like there are flexible boundaries. And then like in the case of major danger, like you're driving alongside a cliff, there are harder boundaries. Like there are like, I forget what they're called, like lane
guardrails.
Guardrails, that's it. Perfect. I couldn't remember the word. They're guardrails to help keep you in your lane. And I think boundaries are like, a lot of people label boundaries, or some people label boundaries as a sign of fear, as a sign of like, you know, whatever. To me, boundaries, I think, are actually a fast track. They actually help you get to your goal a little bit better, as long as you're really deliberate about how you lay them out. So boundaries, I think, in case of emergency, in case of whatever, we should have, you know, ideally the kind of latitude to be able to veer out of our lane a little bit. In some cases, in terms of not just emergency, but also in terms of opportunity. Like if there's an opportunity on this side of the road or to do whatever, right? Like let me pull over, let me explore that, you know. But I think boundaries are one of those things that if you establish your boundaries intelligently, deliberately, discriminatingly, like they will fast track you towards your long-term goals.
Yeah, in my course, we're learning about the difference between rules and boundaries. And I think for me, I dealt with eating disorders and body dysmorphia after wrestling and growing up in Hawaii, where everybody was walking around in swimsuits all the time. Poor self-love, lots of work I've been putting into that. And I'm working towards being able to coach people through all of these issues. And we've been learning that rules are based in fear and then boundaries are based in love. So for example, somebody's struggling with eating, they have all these food rules, like I'm not eating sugar after 6 p.m. and blah, blah, blah. Those are based out of fear, or I don't know, another rule that you could have for a relationship. Like I don't date guys who are under 25, I don't know, something like that, you know? But like, out of a fear, compared to where like the boundaries are for protecting your energy, because we only have so much energy to give out. And when we are under resourced and we're drained because we are giving ourselves too much or whatever, setting up those boundaries to protect your energy is based in love, because you are doing that so that you can show up in the best way possible for your life. And so, you know, I'm setting a boundary of like, I'm not going to go to parties if I'm not feeling up to it, you know, something like that. Because I'm trying to people please or something, is I think the difference of being, you know, I think that's a misconnotation, or I guess the way that you perceive boundaries. I think a lot of times they're people who see them rooted in fear are kind of talking about a rule that they might be making up for themselves. Whereas if you create healthy boundaries that protect your energy, you are going to just feel so much more energized all the time.
Totally. I think it comes down to productivity, and part of productivity is safety, right? So like if you're not having to control for things that put you in a dangerous situation, or put you in a situation that like your health, your livelihood, your sanity could be threatened, you're going to be a whole lot more productive. So like talking about boundaries and talking about food and stuff like that, you know, one of my things in talking about Hawaii is that like I have a total love for like plate lunch. I crave it. I'm one of those guys. It's like if I could eat one meal like a particular meal or something for a meal every single day, I would do it. Like if I like that food, I would do it. Like for example, when I was in college at UCLA, there was a Panda Express there. Yeah. And like I I'd have that same like double orange flavored chicken and chow mein every freaking day that was open. It's like every time I had it, every single time I had it, it was like, so into it. And like people that would watch me eat would be like, hey, bro, you had that before? And I'd be like, they're looking at me like they're like, you look like this is your first time having it. And I'm like, oh man, this is so good. And this could have been like my 300th day in a row or whatever of having that. And it's just like, oh, it tastes so good. But like, I'm one of those people that can get into something and enjoy it that much. So like, for me right now, since I'm working on some particular goals, athletic goals, one of the things that I'm doing is it's like, okay, unless I do X, Y, and Z, these particular workouts or this particular, am able to maintain this particular intensity of training for this many days in a row or however, then I won't reward myself with plate lunch, like that chicken katsu curry. So like, that's one thing. And another thing is like in May, like now it's like July, in early May, I decided, I'm one of these guys that quite loves his vodkas, and I quite appreciate my vodka. But in May, because I was trying to up my running, I said, okay, I can't say for a fact that because I have plenty of friends that will run and drink, and they can handle it just fine. But like for myself, I said all right, if I can't hit this particular running goal that I want, I'm not going to drink. So rather than this is a bad thing and I have to be afraid of it, just holding it in front, here's a carrot, you can have this if you accomplish that. So flipping that kind of perspective sometimes can be really helpful, and sometimes give you less guilt, less shame, less angst about what it is that you want. So it's oh yeah, I like go grind some musubi. Perfect, go run, do your do whatever. So then it's once you knock that off your list, then okay, shoots, we go. But then other times, little flashbacks to home.
I just love the pigeon right now.
But yeah, I mean other times if I don't accomplish that, then it's okay, I would like that. There's no sanction against me not having it. But in observation, out of respect for these boundaries that I set for myself, these goals that I set for myself, let me use this as a motivator to help me do this, and this, so that I can then enjoy that. And then it's a double win. Right.
And those are all based out of loving your own body and wanting to feel good and perform in the way that makes lights you up, a lot of people have these rules because they're terrified of gaining weight and looking like this, because that's where their worth is based in, which I think is the issue. Whereas if you create these kind of boundaries where you're being productive, as you said, in both aspects, then I think that's super awesome. And learning how to see those subtle differences, because a lot of people, they wouldn't be are super unaware of these types of rules or boundaries that they're creating for themselves. So just kind of looking at what your intention is, that's always the key, is what is your intention with this rule or boundary or, way of being, or habit or whatever it is. If it's intended to make you scared, then it's probably needs to be modified a little bit. And I think it's cool that we can, oh, sorry, I'm getting a call. It's cool that we can be a little bit more curious about our ways of being, because a lot of them are just so automatic all the time. We're on autopilot and we've just been doing it this way forever, and we're just going to keep doing it that way. But when we widen that lens and kind of take a pause and look, get curious as to, why do I do this? Why do I do that? It's really cool to discover that.
Totally. And I think to Derek's point earlier about celebrating wins, I think a lot of times if we shifted ourselves out of guilt mode and into motivation mode, we could celebrate a whole lot more of those wins.
Yeah.
So I know one big part of all three of our lives is the martial arts. Tai Ha, she's a badass wrestler. She won the state championship in Hawaii and was a national runner-up wrestler, which is like a huge deal. So that's awesome. You're awesome. Myself, I've been doing jiu-jitsu for over 10 years. I'm a brown belt in jiu-jitsu. I have over a decade of Muay Thai experience. And Mark, I know you're a lifelong martial artist. So let's hear about your journey in martial arts. And I know that's a big part of your origin story into fitness is through the martial arts. So yeah, let's just hear how martial arts has played a significant role in your life and continues to do so.
Martial arts, you know, it's the lens with which I see kind of everything. You know, I think the martial arts and the martial ethos and all the things, all of the positive things that are part and parcel of martial arts really help me kind of like weigh what I want to get into or evaluate the world. And it informs how I move through the world. But I think more than anything else, like regardless of what I've achieved, regardless of what styles I've had, whatever accomplishment in, like it just has shown me that time and time again, like keep that beginner's mind. Like, so regardless of whatever's wrapped around your waist, regardless of whatever medal's wrapped around or like hanging off your neck or whatever trophy is like sitting in your room, like dude, like there's so much motivation that I have to look at everything that I've learned and go like, damn, I gotta up my game.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of it being like, oh, I'm never making progress, I'm not doing this, like it's like this stays ever fresh. I mean, like I've been into the martial arts on a more hardcore level, like probably for the past like 30 years. And I've certainly been in martial arts longer than that, like, you know, since being a kid. But like, man, like there's never been a day when I involve myself in training some facet, some way, shape or form and don't go like I can't believe I have this, like I can't believe I have access to this. So like whether it's through Guru and Asana, whether it's through my my Swagel teacher, Master James Lin, whether it's through the Jiyung school back in Honolulu for Fatka, whatever, right? Like no matter what I have access to, there's always some kind of nuance that I didn't catch before. And it's always like, wow, like that improves, like this little thing, this little detail improves outcomes and performances like this much, like exponentially. And just like in jiu-jitsu where it's like, oh, if I just shifted my hips out that little bit, that escape would have been so much easier, or like the submission would have happened so much faster. Or like if I'm doing judo, like, wait a minute, if I just like pulled on that arm, just this angle a little bit more, then the kazushi is so much bigger. I would have unbalanced them and then I don't have to work so hard for the throw. It's like discovering those little things is constant. Like, I don't see how, like, I mean, even when I talk to the old timers, they're like, you know, they're still discovering stuff every day. And so like martial arts for me is like the ultimate expression of constant evergreen growth.
Yeah, I think it's so funny how it just applies to everything. And like, the more that you tune your skill in whatever you're doing, the more your whole life is going to be affected by those skills you're learning in your sport. I use things I learned in wrestling every single day, how to persevere, how to keep pushing through when my mind says to stop, because our minds usually don't think we're as capable as we actually are, or paying attention to those subtle differences. I mean, I know when I do judo, like if I pull the arm up and across way more, they're going to go over way easier. But it's about building that awareness and paying attention to the details. The details are what win matches so often. If you're a little bit off or a little bit less present, you're not going to see stuff that could totally change the way the whole match plays out, right? And that's the same in life. Like if you're not present, you're not staying aware of the energy in your body, the energy of the people you are surrounding yourself with, all those little details, then you're very likely gonna just be moving a little bit slower than you could be.
For sure. And I think part of that awareness of details is, especially as I've gotten older, is looking at the fundamentals. And when I say the fundamentals, I don't mean just like, okay, you know, how many ukemi can you practice, or how many whatever, like, you know, punches do you do, or how many like angle 1, angle 2s do you do? It's fundamentals even beyond that. Like, how are you working on your posture? How are you working on your control-based range of motion? How are you working on your flexibility? How are you working on your controlling your breathing? And all of these things, and like understanding all of the prehab-based or rehabilitative-based practices that are inherent in martial arts is really what led me to create K3. So yeah, I think there's like a lot of us look at martial arts as a way of dominating a threat. And I think what a lot of us, especially when we're missing when we're younger, is that like sometimes the biggest threat is our own mortality, like our own weakness, our own like lack of development in certain areas, whether it be in terms of our soft tissue or muscle control, our posture, our kinesthetics. So, which is why like I put in like breakfall drills or ukemi drills in K3. And I think like if you look at, you know, what's the number one risk that's requiring that's causing injuries that require hospitalization in the elderly, and it's injuries due to falls. So like if you're taking the time to make that part of a fitness program or part of an exercise program where being able to control your body and change your shape and round as you fall is now something that like every adult is doing, just like they'd be doing like climbing steps or doing walks, then we'd have a lot less injuries due to falls. So I think those are areas of exploration that, you know, we need to bring back and make more mainstream, because like a lot of people understand martial arts from the combative aspect and from the violence aspect. And while it's great to be able to control that and be able to handle those challenges, I think it's also super important for us to be able to handle the challenges that aren't so obvious.
Totally.
Excellent. Another commonality that us three have in common is our ethnicity. I'm Chinese Canadian and French Canadian. My dad's Chinese Canadian. My mom's French Canadian. Taiha, your dad's American. Your mom is
Vietnamese.
And Mark, you're Chinese. Your parents are Chinese.
Yep.
And coming to the martial arts, my shirt right here, Bruce Lee. One of my favorite quotes of his is something along the lines, under the stars, we are all but one. And that's something that really resonated with me from an early age, because I had my French Canadian side of the family and my Chinese Canadian side of the family, and I could tell right away from an early age, we're all the same, we're all one. But I've felt racism and was a victim of racism my entire life. I grew up in a predominantly white area, same as you, Mark. And Delaware, I think it is, right?
Yeah.
Where you were born. Yep. And people are always, white people, oh, that's the Chinese guy, or that's the chink. And then the Chinese people called me like, oh, that's the guaylo, like I think white boy or whatever. Like the Chinese people saw me as white. The white people saw me as Chinese. Where from like, I'm like, what? Like I'm a human being. And so let's talk about race. That's a big issue right now. As Asians, as humans, let's talk about race. Like I know you wrote a big post on that and you have something to say. So what are your thoughts?
It's funny. Yeah, I did write a big post on that a while back, but that was for like a rather small audience. Yeah, I didn't think I actually let much of that one out. Race is an interesting thing. And I think like a lot's being made about racism one way, like where a lot of fingers are being pointed at white people as far as like, you know, white supremacy, white domination, white systemic this and the other. But I think if people were to travel the world more often, we would see that just about everywhere there's some sort of racism. Like Taiha, growing up in Hawaii, like I'm sure you remember Kilauea Day.
It's literally like everybody's race gets made fun of there, but also like I was half white, so I was kind of like, it wasn't bad for me because I look like perfectly mixed, not one way or the other. But yeah, people, if you were white in Hawaii, you were not liked usually. So it's like wherever you are, there's going to be, and it's just ridiculous. Like it's all coming from this I'm right, you're wrong, like this hate kind of mindset where we all know we're all just here in our monkey bodies. Like, monkeys don't have race. It's something that humans have constructed. And yeah, it's craziness right now.
It is, but I think a lot of it comes from like species and tribal, like we have this feeling of limited resources, right? There's some sort of like scarcity fear, right? And because there's that scarcity fear, like I want more power, I want more control, I want more money, I want more sex, I want more whatever, right? More clothes, more cars, what, fill in the blank. And so because I want more, or I feel like I don't have enough of, then like I've got to demonize someone else, right? So it's like one tribe of monkeys is going to compete against the other tribe of monkeys. So it's like, is it necessarily a human construct? Is it an American construct? Is it a North American construct? Is it what? I think interspecies, there's always going to be some kind of competition. Inter and intra-species, actually, I think there's always going to be some competition. I mean, look at lions. Different prides of lions fight each other to the death all the time. So racism, I think, is something that, like, because we as humans can converse and like create a different kind of like understanding, we should be able to do so in a way that doesn't always like fast forward us to violence. You know, like having the ability to create violence is like, I don't know. I think in my mindset, it's great to be able to have that, to be able to issue physical force as an option, but I think it should be something that we do a lot less of, especially for the reasons why we do it. To be able to explore your body, to be able to exert force, to be able to create force, that's awesome. But like physical violence for the sake of just like, I'm afraid of that person, not so much. Like, I don't think that that's the wisest thing, or I want to intimidate that person. That I don't quite dig. But I think there's a lot of emphasis on racism right now because, like, one, we're in a time of history where like the discourse is open and available to it now more than it's ever been before. And I think that's really powerful. It's really awesome. But I also think that we need to understand that some of that is because like we as a species, or we as individuals, are going to naturally point fingers to try and demonize the other so that we seem somehow superior to others, so that we therefore have more access to power, to that kind of feeling of being in like a superior moral ground, and therefore have more resources, more steam, whatever, right? Like in reality, if we just like chill, work on ourselves, help each other, then it becomes less about those power struggles and more about like a synergy instead of like a superiority.
Totally.
Did that make sense, Eric? Did I hit that the way you wanted to?
Kind of. I just want to know how, like, you, like, 'cause I'm sure you have been the victim of racism throughout your life.
Sure.
And Bruce Lee was a huge victim of racism from both the Chinese and from the Caucasian people. How have you dealt with racism in your life against you?
Yeah, as a kid, I certainly was pretty salty about that. Like, as a kid, it was sort of like, you know, whether it's getting beaten up, whether it's getting verbally bullied, whether it's whatever, right? Like there was a lot of anger and a lot of like, I'm going to get them back kind of thing. Now it's sort of like, if someone mouths off, go right ahead. And like, if I've got my phone, I'm going to just record them. And it's like, we live in this era of like digital accountability. Like there's no way these days, especially if someone's got their smartphone on, like their video equipped smartphone, that person can say, I didn't say that. Like, no, I got footage of you saying that, dude. So like, there's next to no way that like at least back when I was a kid, like it's your word versus theirs. Now it's like, no, I have video of you saying that. So now you're going to answer for it. Like that dude that just recently went on that tirade against that Filipino family up in San Francisco Bay Area. Like, for me now, when people are saying things, like I let them talk, like go ahead, enjoy that, like get it out, because the court of public opinion will crucify these people. On a physical level, that hasn't happened as much. So like I haven't had it, luckily, knock wood, I haven't had anyone get up in my face offering to test me for physical reasons, or for racial reasons physically, for years. So yeah, I can't really comment on from a physical aspect, but I would say that I think knowing that like you've got these different threats or these different potential dangers and being able to account for them is super important. And I think that's something that I try and talk to my kids about a lot.
Yeah, that's great. And it's great that this conversation is more amplified and people are starting to think about this. And it's something that I'm still trying to grasp my head around. But there's so much racism against Asians. When this COVID first happened, I know in Canada and the United States, like saying, "Oh, you brought this to our country," and where was the uproar there? Like, where was the uproar 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago? So I'm just having it's like, where were you people before? Is kind of the thing that I'm trying to wrap my head around.
Yeah,
I think there's. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that a lot of people are reacting out of fear. You know, like ignorance breeds fear, and fear breeds hatred, and hatred breeds violence. That's like the 4-part flow right there, right? So like, because people don't know what they're having to deal with, and that lack of like understanding what's going on, there's an innate fear, because it's like, am I going to get sick? Am I going to get this? Am I going to get that? And then they feel threatened. And then when people feel threatened, they automatically look for the first thing they can ascribe that fear to. And unfortunately, the people that they first see are the easiest, most obvious, most accessible thing for them to blame is Asians. And so that unfortunately is kind of how this particular situation has played out. It's not right. It's not enlightened. It's not accurate, certainly at all. And if you look at some of the flows, like it seems that there were two major different strains of COVID, one of which came from China and then one of which came from Southern Europe. So like the one that seemed to put a whole lot of people in the morgues in New York and on the East Coast seemed to be that strain that came from Europe. I don't know if that's still the dominant theory, but you know, I think to be able to point fingers easily and conveniently at Asians is one thing that helps some people kind of make their way through this fear, this uncertainty. Unfortunately, that's really unevolved, and it puts a lot of us in danger. That said, I think a lot of us who are Asians, Asian American, Asian mixed, whatever, right? Like that, if you are realistic about the situation, you understand that there are people that may look at you that way. And so being able to control for those possibilities or control for those eventualities is important. Like, have an idea, rather than thinking, like, hopefully this won't happen to me, play it out in your head, or have that difficult conversation with your siblings, with your family, with people that you admire. Like, how would you deal with it if someone confronted you? So I think those are important conversations to have.
Yeah, thank you. I just know you're a huge influence in so many worlds, but as an Asian American, I just think you're a leader and a leader voice in that community. So I really wanted to just ask you, because it's something that I've been trying to wrap my head around. I know Bruce Lee would have took a stand against this long before it became a problem now, and he was.
Yeah.
So
Bruce Lee passed. Make one last point though. Bruce Lee passed at 32. So a lot of people think that like how Bruce Lee would have dealt with the situation is like canonical. The thing is that he died when he was very young and certainly very hot-headed. Had he lived till now and been in his 70s or 80s, like I think things would be pretty different. Like there would have been a lot of ways that he would dealt with situations or spoken out about situations that wouldn't have been the same way that he would have done when he was 32. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a crucial understanding for people to have, and I have that discussion with my teacher, Guru Inasano, like quite regularly. Like people think that time froze when Bruce Lee died, and that's it. But Bruce would have kept evolving, kept innovating, kept changing, and maturing with his perspectives. So for us to deal with racism, yes, we have to speak out about it. We can't sweep it under the rug. We've got to take a hard stand, and we've got to force difficult conversations. But we can't, like, I think one of the things that's important for Asian Americans to recognize is that getting pissed and letting that anger just kind of like marinate inside you only poisons you. Like, being upset about something and realizing that this is an issue that needs change, and then outlining, okay, I need to do this, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this to help further the change in a productive fashion. That's the sign of maturity. But also, in terms of reality, also being able to control for the fact that, like, there are times and there are individuals who, like, don't want to have a conversation, and, you know, like, they may bully or beat up on the granny that's, like, on the subway station. And we as Asian Americans who are empowered to do something physically about it need to be able to, like, step up and intercede or intervene.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. So that just leads us into the next conversation, and that's mentors. I know Guru Inosanto, who was a student of Bruce Lee, correct?
Yes.
is one of your biggest mentors. So let's take a moment to talk about some of your mentors and what have you learned from them on the path, and what did you learn from them that makes you such a good mentor yourself, Mark?
That's generous. I don't think of myself as a good mentor. I think of myself as someone that's, like, got a lot to learn. But I can tell you, like, ad infinitum about, like, lessons that I've learned from my teachers. Like, my dad is my first, and still to this day, in a lot of ways, like, one of my most impactful mentors. He's one of these guys that I think the most powerful lesson that he's ever taught me has always been gratitude. He's always one of those guys that's, like, no matter how bad things go, no matter how foul things end up, he's almost always got a smile on his face. He's almost always saying thank you. He's never one of these guys like, that's like, he doesn't have that kind of energy of, like, that grumpy old man kind of thing. And he's 93, 94 now. So, like, for him to be able to just, like, you know, every time I see him, he's kind of got that, like, that gentle smile on his face. That's been that lesson of gratitude, and that lesson of looking for those opportunities, and for every small win that's available. That's been, you know, that's been tremendous. Guru Inosanto, God, I don't even know where to start with all of his lessons. Man, I can't. That's a podcast episode in and of itself. Mm-hmm. Martin Wheeler is my Systema teacher. He's wow, what an incredible human being. Martin Wheeler is like a big brother / friend / teacher, all in one. And he talks a lot about softness, and about being able to relax into situations, into pressure, and using that kind of softness and finding out or being sensitive to where someone else's tension is as where the opportunities lie. That is huge. I mean, that I think that's something that I'm still unpacking a lot of. Professor Roy Harris, being able to slow things down. Like, he's one of my jiu-jitsu teachers, probably I would say my main jiu-jitsu teacher. Professor Harris is always talking about how, like, if you look at a technique or look at a situation, there's, like, a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? And a lot of people look for, okay, what's the solution to this situation? And they start their view of a situation at the end, when you're already, like, the lock is already sunk in, the person's already got you in a hold, like, you've already, like, the person's already thrown that hit to that point of, like, right about when it's about to hit you, rather than, like, looking for where it's easiest to intercede or intervene at the beginning, or, you know, something like that. And so Professor Harris's viewpoints on things as far as timing have helped me really appreciate why it's super important to slow down, so that I can now process, there's the beginning, there's the middle, there's the end. Now I can, like, see when it hits this point, I'm already between middle and end. When it's right here in the sweet spot of, like, beginning-ish to middle, then I still have all kinds of room to play and time to play. So yeah, he's tremendous. Pavel Tsatsouline, through all of the kettlebell training that he's given me, has been a tremendous mentor as far as like strength and conditioning training. Gray Cook, through FMS, Functional Movement Systems, man, like not only as a clinician, but also as a human being. Gray Cook, wow, I can't say enough good things about him. Like there was a short period of time when I was like kind of fed up with martial arts, and about to spend more and more, like I was actually shifting more and more of my time towards like strength and conditioning and then clinical medicine. And like I was looking at some of the stuff that Gray was teaching and thinking like, man, you know, you've got all of this great stuff that like is rehab based. Like, how can I learn more of it? And he looked at me really funny and goes, Cheng, you know all this stuff. I go, really? I do. And he said, you know all this martial arts stuff that you've been doing all these years? I think you need to go back there and unpack that, son. And it was like, whoa, okay. So that was, you know, that was a great lesson in a lot of different ways to teach me to be able to look at something I would like, anything, whatever it is, whether it's like a body of knowledge or even a relationship, like stuff that you take for granted. Maybe if you came back and looked at it with fresh eyes, you'll appreciate it in a whole different way. So yeah, I mean, like I've got, man, there's so many people that I can talk about as teachers, as mentors, as like guides. I mean, dude, that's, yeah.
You gave us a quick snapshot for listeners to, if something interests them about one of those people you named, go look it out, go look them up. There's lots of gold to be found, unraveling those threads.
Yes, sir.
So what has been your biggest challenge on your near 50 years on this journey? What has been the biggest challenge you've had to face, and how did you overcome that?
Ooh. Divorce. You know, being raised Catholic, I think for me, that was a big thing, because it's sort of like the, you know, in Roman Catholic upbringing, you're like, you marry and then that's it. There's no divorce. You know, divorce is sort of like you break your promise to God. And I think, you know, also too, wanting so much to, you know, placing so much value on that thought of being a family man, on the thought of like being a good dad for my kids, on the thought of like who I am for them, never mind for anyone else, but who I am for them and who I am for me at the end of the day. Like getting to the point where I could say to myself, like, yes, this needs to happen, is and was, actually was, not so much is now, but that was like my biggest challenge throughout my life so far. Like being able to say like, yeah, no matter what societal expectations are, no matter what like the expectations are of your church, what this, you know, there, or your social crew, doing what feeds your long-term health, doing what feeds like the long-term health for your children, and what sets the right example of what love is, what boundaries are, what like care is, what respectful discourse is, what intimacy is, all of these things. Like if you start making compromises in some of those things in crucial ways, then you are then like, you know, that it's that phrase that we're hearing a lot now, right? Like silence is complicity. Like in a lot of ways in terms of family relationships, right? If you compromise on certain things that are super important and are clutch, you are then sending the message to everyone that's observing you that you endorse that. And so like for my kids, I wanted them, like, especially my son, and looking back on it, you know, I guess my daughter too, but like for my son, I wanted him to understand that there are certain things that are not okay, right? Like if you see your male role model being treated in a certain way and like that's acceptable and that's just how it goes, and it's taken a beat down and you realize that like, wait, that's what I got to, that's what I should emulate, then if you perpetuate that, if you as a coach, let's say, for example, like if you as a coach are all about like, yeah, I've got to just beat down my athletes as hard as I can, and then like as a junior coach, you see that and think like, well, they did it, so now I got to do it. And then that's how like generational dysfunction gets passed on. So being able to recognize a pathology and being able to say, like, I put the brakes on that, regardless of the judgment that people are going to lay on you, and the cost of transitioning, like, you know, moving, relocating, all of the headaches and hassles that go with that, I think that's where you get really tested. Like, how committed are you to growth?
Yeah. And it kind of ties into what we were talking about earlier on how adaptable are you? Because sometimes making those changes that are needed are super, super, super uncomfortable. And sometimes you can't even see what the change is because you're so blinded by the comfortability of the situation. And that's when the universe will throw something at you and be like, nope, that relationship wasn't right for you, or like whatever it is. Like, it's funny how I've been pushed out of a lot of things by not my own doing, but by some outside source. And then on the other side of it, I was like, whoa, I really needed to get out of that. And just learning how to release that identity of, you know, this family man or whatever the things you're saying, like happily married, whatever. It's learning how to release what's no longer serving you, no matter how much other people think you should be in that situation, or how it makes you feel to release that when you know that it no longer serves you, and you still have the courage to do that thing, even though it's so uncomfortable and it's so hard. Practicing gratitude through it will probably really help. That's what I've been doing through any type of uncomfortable shift or transition I've been working through, is you always are grateful for the lessons on the other side. So the more that you can try to see the lessons during it and practice gratitude during it, the more you will be able to move through it with grace and with ease as best as you can. So I commend you for being able to do that. I've witnessed it, and it's so, so difficult. And being able to show your kids what, you know, breaking those generational curses, because there's so many, and it's crazy how kids will be like, I'm never going to be like my parents. And then they end up like that anyways, without even the awareness of it, because it's just the automatic patterning that has been developed throughout their years. So that's beautiful. And I'm really happy to hear that you are able to look at the divorce as a lesson, because most people can choose to be bitter over it.
I mean, like we were talking about earlier when Derek brought up the point about boundaries and like what's the importance of boundaries. I think boundaries are only as useful as the feedback they give you, right? And like the consequences. So like when people if people keep violating your boundaries, and it's like, then you don't change anything, then those boundaries are just like hot air, right? And the more hot air that comes out, the more friction and the more tension there is inside of you. And that's like a self-poison. So until you can actually like enact what those consequences are, what those boundaries are like, and be able to walk, or be able to like say, cool, like I did see how you're doing that, and that's cool, but like I'm not going to be a part of that. Whether that's in terms of training, whether that's in terms of a work environment, whether that's in terms of like whatever it is, a family mechanic, like until we can establish those hard boundaries and enforce them in a way that's not necessarily hateful, but just like separate, like I don't want to be part of that. Until we can model that and understand how to do that with class, we're never going to be able to create the kind of relationships we want, or model those relationships for the people that are looking at us. And so as a dad, that was a big thing. I wanted to be able to model to my kids, like when things go south, and if there's no forward progress through discourse, through trying to talk it out, through trying to reason it out, through trying to like create space, like there are times when you need to be able to break a relationship, and this is how you do it.
Beautiful.
So as a hero goes about their journey, there's a lot of resistance in the way. And author Stephen Pressfield describes resistance as that negative force in the world that keeps us from fulfilling our dreams. Steve Maxwell calls it fear, false events appearing real. how do you as a hero overcome resistance when it comes up in your life? And how do you as a hero overcome fear?
Damn. Again, I'm not saying this to try and like play humble, but I do not find myself a hero in any way, shape, or form. My daughter would say that I kind of look like Aquaman right now, but I'd argue that. Damn, when it comes to fear or when it comes to tension, I feel like the way that I overcome that is to try and analyze it as much as possible. And then in the analysis of it, and as I grow in understanding of it, relax into it. And so as I relax into it, I'm less rigid, I'm less tense, I'm less like anxious. And then I can start appreciating where the opportunities are. And so the more there's like, I mean, for both of you guys who grapple, right? Like there are times when someone's got you pinned or someone's doing whatever, like got you on the ground, especially during groundwork. And you're like, I have no freaking way out. And then you relax for a second, or you hear something like a good instruction from your coach. And it's like, there's an opening there. Why didn't I see that? Like, how come I didn't get that? And it's like, if you relaxed enough, or if you weren't like fixated on where all of the pressure was, maybe you would feel where that opening is, you know? So like being able to for me at least, being able to slow myself down enough to be able to go, okay, I'm tensing up in these places, but there's opportunity over here in these other places. And being able to recognize those opportunities as well as like when I'm inhibiting myself and then act accordingly. That's the big thing.
Awesome.
A lot of people get caught up in paralysis in that analysis. How do you avoid that?
If I don't find anything actionable, then I realized like I'm probably just sitting there wallowing. And wallowing is like, you know, I think when I was in my 20s, I did pretty well. Like I'd get upset about something, get angry over something, get whatever emotional about something, and then just be so consumed by that negative energy. And now it's like the moment that something's ticking me off, I recognize that like those triggers are educational moments. There's lessons in there. And so where is the tension inside of me that stimulus is now triggering? And then when I understand where that tension is or what's at the root of that tension, then I can kind of do something about it. But yeah, the tough part is that like a lot of times we react, and then that reaction becomes a snowball. It's like one reaction into another and another and another. And then it's like, it becomes this massive unstoppable thing because of like, you know, the impetus behind it. But like recognizing that we're in some sort of pattern, and then like going, okay, step back, give space. Again, that same repeat to that theme of giving space. Giving yourself space sometimes and allowing yourself to go like, oh, I'm doing this. And now why am I doing this? Oh, because of this. Like those kinds of analyses, and being able to go like, okay, now instead of doing that, where do I need to put my energy to accomplish my goals? And then going back and again, thinking about where are my long-term goals? Is what I'm doing now, and is my reaction to this particular stimulus moving me towards my goals? And if it's not, then it just becomes math. Like you see like what you're doing is totally opposite of what you want, and then you just stop.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, one sec.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to talk about how it's so easy for people to identify with those patterns. Like that is just the way I am because it's been the way that I've been. But it's about choosing to take that step back and being curious as to, you know, non-judgmental, be curious. Why am I doing this? Where is this coming from? Where did it start? Because you can address like the past 2 years, but if the issue that's caused it was from when you were 4, like it's probably going to manifest as some other issue, you know? So just being curious and really like looking at your life and not being afraid to take responsibility, because a lot of the time we don't want to do that. We want to blame other people and situations for the ways that we're being, but our experience in this plane is our choice. Like we can choose to be in this energy, we can choose to look at it this way. And once you take that action to look at yourself, take responsibility, and start becoming more aware so that you can choose how you want to be is so beautiful, because we're not stuck in being a certain way. I'm not just an anxious person. I experience anxiety or anxious situations, but that's not who I am, right? It's all about releasing all these things that we've labeled ourselves as for so long. And it's very empowering to know that if you want to, you can look at yourself and change.
Totally.
So, Mark, you have a very clear lens, and that just doesn't happen. You need to take action to clear that lens, to wipe off the the grime, the dirt that has come through on you and from society, whatever, throughout the days, throughout the years, throughout the decades. And a big part of de-griming yourself from this bullshit is a self-care practice. So let's talk about that. What are your essential self-care practices, your daily habits and routines that you like to share?
Ooh, one that I think that I'm pretty good at is sleep. So that, like, for some people, I understand that's like a major challenge, like just getting to the point where they're able to have like a solid, good, even 6 hours of sleep. Like some folks I know, like they're grateful to get like a solid 4. To me, I can't comprehend running on that little sleep. You know, and everyone's got their own circadian rhythms and stuff like that. But for me, like, I'm pretty lucky in the sense that, like, once my head hits the pillow, unless I've like had too big of a dinner or like too adrenaline out or something else like that, like I'm usually pretty good. Like I knock out, and the moment I lie down, I'm knocking out. So yeah, that sleep is at the top of the list for me. Fasting is another thing, right? Like, much to my parents' chagrin, because like typical Pake parents, like they're all like, "Oh, you eat yet?" I'm like, "No." Oh, how come you didn't eat? And then they want you to eat. And so it's like there are times when I have to tell them like, "No, I'm good. Like I'm better off like without this particular meal." And it's not because like I'm already full, even though that's the excuse that I give them, and I'm like, really to that because they're not listening. But like there are times when once in a while, like doing without a meal, like your immune system actually gets a little bit of a kickstart from that, like a little bit of a boost from not eating. And also too, right, like your body tends to like, I think the occasional skipping of a meal is quite healthy because you don't fall into a rut, a metabolic rut. So that's one of the things that I do. Training whenever I can. Like I love movement, and movement, I think, helps prime the pump for our circulation and certainly lymphatics, right? Like while the circulatory system in terms of like arteries and veins in the heart is great in terms of creating circulation through the body, the lymphatics are dependent on movement to be able to flow. So being able to explore movement in the way that I do, whether it's like standing kick punch stuff, whether it's with implements, whether it's with kettlebells, whether it's like inverted, whether it's like doing throws with Shaijel, Chinese wrestling, or whatever, right? Like I'm so grateful for that. Like clearly nutrition isn't, I wouldn't say is my strongest point, in the sense that like I don't have a very regimented, like, oh, I got to eat this, like this many macros and what. Like I don't, that's not where my wheelhouse is. Like I'm the guy that like, yeah, I like musubi, I like spam, I like, you know, like give me all of those things that are like, oh, those are terrible for you. Like I don't eat those like nonstop, but I don't demonize them either. I don't think that there's a particular need for us to like look at something that we're eating with that much shame and that much anxiety. So yeah, I think that like as far as foods go, there are some things that the mainstream might look at as like less than ideal, but I think in moderation, it's all good. Self-care, other things in self-care, I think appreciation and outlook, being able to, you know, like with computers, right? Like once in a while you'll defrag the drive, or you'll like run a scan for like malware and stuff like that. I think being able to do that in and of ourselves, like for our own thought processes and for our own beliefs, and being able to see like where it is in like how we view the world or how we interact with the world, and see like, is this really serving my best long-term goals, or is this just some bullshit that's like vestigial? Like being able to go through what you like, all of your sacred cows, and go like, is this serving my best interest, or is this just like, you know, generational dysfunction? I think that those are some of the best self-care practices.
Amazing. So as we near the end of this interview, we have a couple more questions, but I want to ask you before we get to those about K3. That's how me and you met. And it was such an amazing training, the most fun I've had at training. You mentioned play. It was like so playful the whole time. I couldn't believe the group dynamics. It was the strongest group dynamics in only 2 days. Like everyone felt like we knew each other so well. And some of those people I didn't even talk to. It's just because they're unconscious of our practicing. So talk about the K3 combat movement systems that you and your friend Jimmy, you hadn't created.
K3 came about because like around 08, 09, people started asking me like, hey doc, what do you do for like, what is your training like? What do you enjoy doing? And I thought about that and I was like, well, you know, obviously I enjoy kettlebells. And then I enjoy like Kali and Kabong, like implement-based martial arts, like weapons. And then, you know, other empty hand martial arts like Kung Fu, Karate, Capoeira, like, so I thought, there's actually like 3 Ks in there, like kettlebells, kick punch arts, and then, you know, Kali, Kabong. And then over time, I started realizing like, wait a minute, all of this stuff that I'm into here with all of these aspects, you can train them for tactical or combat application, which is their original intent, and certainly a very wonderful way of doing those arts and applying those arts for the general for a segment of the general public. But if you wanted to look at wider application, like what do all warrior cultures really need? Like warriors have to be great athletes, or need to be ideally great athletes. So what's a great athlete? A great mover. So if we're creating a great mover and trying to improve how someone moves and trying to improve that person's durability and longevity, doesn't that kind of serve everybody? And I thought that's where we're going to go with K3. So that's the origin story behind K3 there. And Jimmy, Jimmy, luckily, like, you know, I threw out that idea of K3. Jimmy and I were talking about it one time, and I think I'd whiteboarded quite a bit of stuff out already. And Jimmy came over one time, was hanging out and saw it, and was like, dude, this is gold. And I go like, yeah, it's whatever. You know, because like sometimes the stuff that you see the most often, you don't have an appreciation for, because you take it for granted, because it's, you know, familiarity breeds contempt is the saying. Jimmy looked at it and goes, no, like this needs to go out to the public. And, you know, from before my divorce all the way through my divorce, and then following divorce, and especially during the divorce, like when I was just like, there were days when I was in the dumps, and Jimmy was like, dude, get back to work on that. Get back to work on that. So it's like, he reframed my mindset from like that wallowing that I was talking about earlier to like, now you have a mission statement, deliver on this shit. And so because of that, you know, K3 was born. So yeah, that's why Jimmy's just as much a founder as I am. Yeah, absolutely. And so let's talk about that briefly, about you and Jimmy. So you guys are friends and business partners, just like Kyle and I. We're entering a new business partnership ourselves with this podcast. How do you be a good partner in a new venture? I think that kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. Like sometimes just slowing down and giving space. A lot of times we get so into our own to-do list, like we get so excited about like, there are these things we need to accomplish that we end up slighting the other person. And sometimes it's just like, okay, you've got pressures that you're dealing with, and there may be deadlines that we've got to deliver stuff on. But being able to respect those deadlines, communicate those deadlines, but still prioritize the other person in a way where like they feel seen and heard and respected and appreciated is clutch. I mean, I know it sounds almost like relationship counseling and stuff like that, but dude, like any two people that relate, like as friends, as business partners, you know, you've got like, there's that consistent logic that comes through. Like you've got to be there for them.
Beautiful. So Taha, let's wrap this up with your closing questions, and I have mine that we ask every guest.
All right, I got one question for you. In 3 words or a phrase, if that works better, how would you describe the experience you are having on this earth?
Roll with it.
I love that. You haven't heard that one yet. That's good.
Roll with it. Beautiful.
Thank you.
So for my question, I'm going to get funky with time, and we're going to fast forward. We're going to hit the fast forward dial on this. And we are now at an 85-year-old Mark Chen. Who is that 85-year-old? What does your life look like, and what is the legacy you've left behind?
85-year-old Mark Cheng, probably bald as hell. Wow. Hopefully playing with my grandkids. No pressure to my kids on that, but man, hopefully I'm somewhat in, again, who knows what the cards hold, but God willing, someone's still healthy, someone's still vibrant, someone's still like a little bit mischievous, someone playful, someone that like, if we're talking on a podcast and you're just listening to the audio, you can't tell how old I am. Like that would be the ideal. Like someone that when you hear the words, it's still relevant no matter what age you are. And someone that is still growing, someone that is still like pulling you along for the ride. Yeah.
Beautiful. So I want you to envision this bald as hell, Mark Chen, grandfather, still athletic, Mark Chen. So picture him in your mind right now. And since we're getting funky with time, I'm going to bring back a message from that 85-year-old Mark Chen to the current day Mark Chen. What would he tell you?
Relax more.
Beautiful.
Relax more. That's one of those things that like I think about quite often. Like these days when I train, especially when I'm teaching like a lot of the rehab and sports performance type stuff, like I think to myself, Jesus, had I known even like a tenth of what I know now back when I was like 16, I would like literally like a tenth of what I know. I would have been such a freaking badass, and then so many fewer injuries, so much happier, so much everything, right? And a lot of it, like looking back now, like if I was to be able to sit with my 16-year-old self, I'd be like, dude, intensity is great, intensity is awesome, but don't confuse intensity with focus. Like you can be focused and still relaxed, and like understand the value of chill, like understand the value of slowing down enough to create space, and don't confuse that with laziness.
Yes. Awesome.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Mark. We're really grateful to have this conversation with you. To close, we're going to bring our fist in to the winner circle, because this is a place where we all could join. We're all in that process. So thank you so much. I can't wait till level 2, K3, when the world is back up and running. I will see you there.
Dig it.
Thank you so much, Mark. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I learned a lot from you, and I'm excited to hopefully connect more soon and hopefully take some of these amazing courses that you're putting out, because I love learning all types of stuff movement. So thank you again so much for your time, and hopefully we'll have you back sometime soon too.
I would dig that. And like, if it's really easy to get a hold of me, or rather it's really easy to see what I'm up to across social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. My handle's the same, at DrMarkCheng, at Dr. Mark Cheng. So like, that's probably the easiest way to just keep a finger on the pulse of what I'm doing and then what I'm putting out there. So
awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you too.
Yeah,
guys.
thank you. I'm going to hit the end here.